its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago and has faced fierce resistance from the much smaller Ukrainian army. Mudavadi held talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. A Kenyan intelligence report presented to lawmakers in February said that more than 1,000 Kenyans had been recruited to fight on Russia's side in Moscow's war in Ukraine. Kaeli Tlekumalu has the story.
Kenyan Foreign Minister Mudavadi says the two countries have agreed that Kenyans shall not be enlisted through the Russian Ministry of Defense. He says consular services will be organized for those requiring assistance. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov says Kenyan citizens had voluntarily signed contracts to fight alongside the Russian army. Some Kenyan politicians have described what they say is a network of rogue state officials who have colluded with human trafficking syndicates to recruit Kenyans to fight for Russia in Ukraine.
The refusal by South Africa's Justice Sisi Khampepe to step down as chairperson of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases inquiry should not be declared unlawful simply because it was not taken by the Commission's the Commission's heads as a collective. This is the argument set forth by former President Jacob Zuma in the review application of Khampepe's decision at the High Court in Johannesburg. Counsel for Zuma, Advocate Dalimpofu, says because the decision was not taken by a properly constituted panel, including Commissioners Diale Homo and Advocate Andrea Gabriel, it cannot stand in law and Khampepe must go.
The ruling, which brings us all here, was only signed by the chairperson and was only produced by her and not by the commission. Just as this panel is sitting here, if tomorrow a judgment comes that says only Justice Bakwa is giving this and we don't know what the other two judges had to say, that by definition cannot be called the decision of the court. Remember, we live in a democracy of transparency. So we also need to know, so does this court, need to know, for example, whether Justice Homo or Advocate Gabriel SC agreed or did not agree.
South Africa's Minister of Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture, Gayton McKenzie, has criticised language academics for the slow pace of integration of African languages into as many facets of the country's society as possible. He was speaking at the Pan-South African Language Board's National Language Summit in Cape Town. The summit has brought together stakeholders across government, academia, activists and business to look into ways of growing and sustaining African languages. McKenzie says his administration will create a supportive environment.
I get criticized, and I want to use you an example that people say I concentrate more on sport and less on languages, less on culture. But let's be honest, the drivers of sport and the drivers of language in this country, the coaches, I'll compare them to the professors because they both coach and teach people. The professors, you are too cordial and generous in your dealings, but sports people, they go for it. And the only way for government to listen, government listens to forcefulness, government responds to enthusiasm.
South Africa's Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen says the lack of a border fence between South Africa and Zimbabwe is compounding the spread of foot and mouth disease, or FMD, in the Limpopo province. The broken fence in areas bordering the Kruger National Park is another problem, as buffalo can spread the disease. Steenhuisen was leading the 4th nationwide mass FMD vaccination rollout in Polokwane.
Limpopo is one of those provinces that will always have to have some form of prophylactic vaccination on that interface. There's two big problems. Zimbabwe has a major outbreak of foot and mouth disease, and a lot of the infection that we have comes cross-border. But the second thing is the border here in Limpopo with the Kruger National Park. The buffalo here in the Kruger Park are a carrier of FMD. When the fences are broken, either through by elephants or other animals, the buffalo get out and there's a cross-contamination that happens with the cattle. And it obviously creates a unique problem here in Limpopo, in Mpumalanga and in KwaZulu-Natal.
And finally, the European Union has announced it will deliver more than $1 billion in humanitarian aid to Middle East countries and regional states hosting refugees. This comes as Israel continues its bombardment of Gaza, with the latest attack claiming 12 lives, including 9 police officers. Israel is also advancing its attacks on Iran, along with the United States. The largest share of the aid, over $200 million, will go to Syria.
Legend shed light on his invitational I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
A very good morning to you. You're listening to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. My name is Peter Ndoro, and I'm inviting you to stay connected to Africa and the world with Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. You can listen and watch anywhere, anytime at channelafrica.co.za, and you can also catch us on your mobile apps. Just look for SABC Plus, and you can also listen via the DSTV and OpenView audio bouquets. You can also catch us on our social media platforms. On Facebook, we're on at Channel Africa, and all the other social media platforms, look for at Channel Africa 1, and you can find us there as well. So what's coming up on the program today? We've got quite a few things. We look at a major diplomatic development as Kenya's foreign minister holds talks in Moscow with Russia, agreeing to stop recruiting Kenyan nationals to fight in the Ukraine war. And I wonder what this says about Africa's role in positioning in a very complicated global conflict. And then to South Sudan, where a centuries-old customary law has been updated for the first time in more than 80 years, abolishing forced marriages and introducing new protections for women and children. We'll be unpacking what this could mean for communities and for legal reform across the continent. And that's what's coming up on the program. Stay with us. You're listening to Channel Africa's Rise and Shine. And of course, Channel Africa is first with the African story globally.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Malawi's President Peter Mutharika has directed that a fresh inquiry be conducted into the plane crash that claimed the life of the former Vice President Saulos Klauser, political analyst Undule Mwakasangula. Undule, what are they politically and institutional factors that may have influenced President Peter Mutharika's decision to order a fresh inquiry into the crash?
Let me start by saying that the death of the former president and 8 others was a painful national tragedy. You know, public trust is very important. If people feel that the first report left gaps, the president may believe that a fresh inquiry could restore confidence and provide closure. So the decision by the president may be influenced by public pressure, but also the need to rebuild trust in the state institutions.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
It's a little after 9 minutes past 6 Central African Time, and it's time for our daily Africa Roundup. And each morning, after the 6 o'clock news, we bring you a concise update on the key developments that have been shaping the continent and the world over the past 24 hours. And we do this with insights from our team of journalists, analysts, as well as the voices of our newsmakers who place the day's biggest stories into context for you, helping you stay informed, connected, and hopefully prepared for the news day ahead. Let's begin with this story. The Republic of Congo is waiting for the outcome of Sunday's presidential election, with incumbent President Denis Sassou Nguesso, one of Africa's longest-serving leaders, widely expected to secure another term in office. Early reports indicate a very low voter turnout, with many observers suggesting the result was largely seen as a foregone conclusion. Blanche Ancla reports.
As residents cast their vote, one voiced hope for a peaceful aftermath.
We all know that after elections there is always some movement, but we want peace. We don't want people to fight, to have disputes and all that. We want our country to move forward in a good framework. We don't want war. We want the new president who will come to bring new change, rather a change in our Congo.
Sassou faces 6 little-known challengers. 2 prominent opposition leaders are in prison and others in exile. Several opposition parties boycotted the vote, saying the process lacked credibility. Electoral bodies are dominated by figures aligned with the ruling Congolese Labour Party. Provisional results were expected within 2 to 3 days of polls closing on Sunday.
Africa's Agriculture Minister, John Steenhuisen, says that the spread of foot and mouth disease in the northern Limpopo province is being worsened by gaps in the border fence neighbouring Zimbabwe, as well as damaged livestock containment fences. Now, the minister made the remarks whilst overseeing the country's 4th nationwide vaccination campaign against this disease in the northern city of Polokwane.
Limpopo is one of those provinces that will always have to have some form of vaccination, prophylactic vaccination on that interface. There's 2 big problems. Zimbabwe has a major outbreak of foot and mouth disease, and a lot of the infection that we have comes cross-border. But the second thing is the border here in Limpopo, the Kruger National Park. The buffalo here in the Kruger Park are a carrier of FMD. When the fences are broken, either through by elephants or other animals, the buffalo get out and there's a cross-contamination that happens with the cattle. And that obviously creates a unique problem here in Limpopo. The province has reported they've vaccinated over 60% of the communal herd and over 40% of the commercial herd. So they're making good progress, and obviously we're now waiting for the next big shipment of vaccines to arrive in South Africa from Biogenesis and from Dolvet.
For decades, mining in central Nigeria took place far from communities, but in Plateau State, families are now digging deep shafts in their own backyards. A dangerous and unusual shift driven by poverty and the minerals lying just beneath their homes. David Doyle picks up the story for us.
When they are under the ground, sometimes accident can happen with them. The well will fall on them. But every day we are praying to God. Let God save them.
Jiang's 4 sons and other miners, working without safety equipment, descend beneath the ground in search of tin and columbite. What the sons dig up is sold to pay for school fees and fertilizer. They make roughly between $20 and $35 a week after sharing proceeds with the other miners. Jiang says the mining means that as a family, they are just managing. She adds that in a country with widespread insecurity, it's work that keeps young people from making desperate choices.
You see, as our youth, they don't want to, but we advise them, see, it's better for you to come and do this work. Instead of you to go and thief, to go and becoming a kidnap, to come to something terrorist like this, we don't want.
And 6:14 Central African time, shares in Meta platforms took a turn yesterday, and that was as a result of about a 3.3% turn on Monday, following a Reuters report. The social media giant plans to cut at least 20% of its workforce, and the company is reportedly restructuring as it shifts more resources into artificial intelligence, betting that technology will drive future growth. Ciara Lee has this report.
If Meta settles on the 20% figure, the cuts will be the biggest since a late 2022 and early 2023 restructuring. That eliminated around 21,000 employees. After falling behind in the AI race, Meta has spent heavily in recent years to catch up by building data centers. It expects a capital outlay of up to $135 billion this year, roughly double of last year's spending. It's meant to secure the cloud capacity needed to train and run AI models. Meta's workforce totaled 79,000 at the end of December. On Friday, in response to Reuters' request for comment, it said, quote, "This is speculative reporting about theoretical approaches."
And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup, where we give you a concise look at some of the top stories that played out in the last 24 hours. And we'll do it again tomorrow morning after the 6 o'clock news. Coming up shortly, we zoom into East Africa with our commentator there, Dennis Beru, to find out what's been happening in the region.
Darubini ya Afrika na I am Henry Shakif.
Inaelezwa kwamba serikali kule visiwani Zanzibar imetangaza mpango mkubwa wa kuweza kurejesha urithi unaoungwa mkono na uwekezaji wa sekta ya umma na binafsi yenye thamani ya dola milioni 12. Unadhani sasa Zanzibar imeamua kujipambanua yenyewe kama yenyewe?
Hizi ni habari njema kwanza katika kuongeza uwekezaji kwenye sekta ya utalii, ngoni mwa sekta mama kwa serikali ya mapinduzi ya Zanzibar.
Pengine unawaambia nini Watanzania walioko nje ya Tanzania na walioko ndani kuweza kuzitizama fursa hizi kwa jicho la pili na kuweza kuwekeza ndani?
Jambo hili lina mtazamo mpana. Cha kwanza ni aina ya maisha ambayo baadhi ya watu visiwani Zanzibar wamekuwa nayo, na hii ni kutokana na ile colonial legacy, ile kutawaliwa na wenzetu wametawaliwa na masultani.
Darubini ya Afrika kila Jumatatu hadi Ijumaa kuanzia saa 11 kamili hadi saa 12 kamili jioni majira ya Afrika ya Kati.
Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
It's time now to look at some of the stories making headlines in the East Africa region. In Madagascar, the country's transitional leader has appointed anti-corruption chief Mamitiana Rajwasarian as the new prime minister just days after dissolving the previous government. In Rwanda, the government has warned it could withdraw troops from the counterinsurgency mission in northern Mozambique if international funding for the operation is not secured. And in the Horn of Africa, tensions are also rising after Somalia warned Israel against establishing a military base in Somaliland, a move that Mogadishu says would violate its sovereignty. Well, to help us make sense of these developments and what they could mean for politics and security in the region, we're now joined by Dennis Beru, who's a journalist and team leader at Grassroots Journalism in Kenya. A very good morning to you, my brother. Always good to talk to you. How are you feeling today?
Good morning, Peter Ndoro. Good to speak to you this morning.
So let's start in Madagascar, where the president has appointed the anti-corruption chief Mamitiana Rajwasarian as prime minister after dismissing the previous government. What does this move tell us about the political direction the country perhaps is taking at this time?
Thank you so much, Peter Ndoro. Of course, the appointment comes after the president reshuffled the entire cabinet. And Erisalama Rajarvelo, who was dismissed last week at the cabinet as the proper prime minister. And Rajarvelo had been appointed shortly after Randia Arena took power in October during the protests that forced former President Andry Rajoelina to flee the country. And speaking during a ceremony at the presidential palace in Antananarivo, the capital, Randrianira said the nation required a bold decision at a critical moment, describing the new premier as a man of integrity who cannot be bought with money. Randrianira denies accusation that his rise to power amounted to a coup, maintaining that the constitutional court legally transferred authority to him. He has also promised a 2-year transition that includes a nationwide consultation, drafting of a new constitution, and a presidential election planned for 2027. And political analysts say the sudden removal of the previous prime minister came as a surprise, though some believe growing demands for reform and pressure from youth-led protest movement may have influenced the decision.
Okay, so let's turn a little bit to regional security and this threat by Rwanda to withdraw its troops from its work in fighting insurgency in northern Mozambique if funding doesn't come through. What role have the Rwandan forces played in stabilizing Cabo Delgado?
Peter Ndoro, Rwanda has really played a very crucial role in ensuring that there is a stability in the region. This follows the insurgent of the jihadist group associated with Al-Shabaab. And remember, Rwanda has about 1,000 soldiers and police in oil-rich Cabo Delgado province since 2021, helping to fight in the insurgent. And according to the foreign minister of Rwanda, Oliver Nduhungirehe, in a statement where he posted on X saying that they are ready to leave Mozambique if their work and achievement are not valued. And remember, he was responding to media report that European Peace Facility finance for peacekeeping in the region was set to run out in May with no plans for the renewal. And Rwanda's government spokesperson Jolande Makolo said on Friday that its costs were at least 10 times higher than 20 million euros spent by the European Union on the anti-jihadist operations there. And the army's work countering terrorism in Cabo Delgado has benefited the Mozambicans, people and companies investing in LNG. Government said, that is according to Makolo. And remember, the northern part of Mozambique has enormous reserves of gas, which attracted the attention of energy giants, including a French company, Total Energies, Italy's Eni, and the United States, that is Exxon Mobil. And at the end of January, Peter Ndoro, Total Energy relaunched the construction on a massive gas project there, halted 5 years earlier after a jihadist attack that claimed hundreds of lives. And remember, more than 6,000 people have been killed since the insurgent began in 2017. This is according to the tracker ECLED.
So with the SADC forces having withdrawn, I think it was 2024, July, Rwanda, I think, is the only country now assisting Mozambique. If they depart, can Mozambique's own army cope with the insurgency?
Peter Ndoro, it will be difficult for the Mozambique to fight the jihadists. Remember, they seek for the help from the SADC, forces to come and help fight the insurgent. And the remaining troops, that is the Rwandan troops who are now remaining and are now threatening to leave. It will be a big blow for the Mozambican government because they really relied on the foreign troops in ensuring that they are fighting these jihadists. We hope that probably there might be some intervention from even the SADC itself to ensure that the soldiers does not leave Cabo Delgado.
So another development that's causing some tension, Somalia is warning Israel against establishing a military base in Somaliland. Why is this such a sensitive issue for Mogadishu and for the wider Horn of Africa?
Peter Ndoro, this is a very critical issue, and the ongoing Middle East war, and Israel sees Somaliland as a strategic, a point where they can set up their military camp. And remember, the Somaliland's officials have not ruled out any or allowing Israel military presence and seek to build strategic ties with both Israel and the United States. And this is amid, the tension that is happening, and Somalia is also negotiating to acquire up to 24 JF-17 fighter jets from Pakistan and expanding military cooperation the US. And the warning comes. The Somalia as a country has warned any military presence by the Israel, and this warning comes as tension in the Gulf of Aden, a key maritime corridor linking the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean, as the conflict involving Iran escalates and Somalia explores plans to strengthen its military, including negotiation to acquire up to 24 JF-17 Thunder Block 3 fighter jets from Pakistan. Peter Ndoro, this comes after Israel recognized Somaliland as a country, and we saw the president of Somalia saying that they are ready to work with Israel because they see Israel as a key strategic partner. And remember, there are reports in Mogadishu. These reports came from Mogadishu following Sweden's radio airport that said that Israel is exploring possibilities of establishing a military installation near the strategic port city of Berbera in Somaliland.
And that's where we're going to have to leave it for today, my dear brother. Thank you so much indeed. Always great talking to you. Thanks so much indeed for that update on what's been happening on the region in East Africa.
Thank you so much, Peter Ndoro, and have a good day. Asante sana.
Asante, kwaheri. So that was Dennis Beru making sense of what's been happening in the East Africa region today and this week. And an interesting development that he was talking about there. And at the time, we didn't connect the dots because we couldn't see into the future. But he mentioned there that I think it was January the 6th, we saw Gideon Saar, the foreign minister of Israel, traveling to Somaliland. So this was in January. And he met with the Somaliland president at the time, Mohammed Abdurrahman Abdullahi, to discuss diplomatic relations and cooperation. This trip was historic because it was the first official visit by such a high-ranking Israeli leader after Israel became the first country to recognize Somaliland as an independent state in December 2025. So a chain of events took place. December 2025, Israel recognizes Somaliland. January the 6th, Israel's foreign minister arrives in Somaliland. Fast forward to March, and guess what happens? Israel attacks Iran and now is wanting to set up a base in Somaliland. So one wonders if this actually hasn't been something that's been planned for a very, very long time. If Somaliland was being recognized as far back as December last year. Fascinating development, and I'm pretty sure that the analysts are going to connect the dots for us because maybe there have been clues that perhaps we weren't paying attention to. All right, so that's your East Africa wrap. There'll be another one same time next week on a Tuesday. Right now, though, it's 6:30, which means it's time for your news headlines. And we say good morning once again to Jualani Tulo Ngwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headline, Kenya's Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi says Moscow and Nairobi have agreed that Kenyan nationals will no longer fight for Russia in Ukraine. The Pan-South African Language Board, PANSALB, said it's taking steps to ensure the integration of African languages into South African society. The board was reacting to criticism from Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture Minister Gayton McKenzie of the perceived slow integration of these languages. And finally, the U.S. State Department is reportedly considering withholding life-saving assistance to people living with HIV in Zambia as a negotiating tactic to force the government there to sign a deal giving the United States more access to its critical minerals. I will have details on these and other stories at 7 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's get an African perspective on what's been happening in the world of sport as we say good morning to you. Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. We kick off with football news. South African coach Rulani Mokoena has been cleared to leave Algeria following a brief detention at the Houari Boumediene airport regarding alleged currency regulation violations. According to a post on social media, he has officially departed Algerian side MC Alger after a mutual termination of his contract shortly after his arrest. Head of Public Diplomacy for South Africa, Clayson Munyela, confirmed that Mokoena was cleared, safe and staying in a hotel following the airport issue. The Facebook post further saying Mokoena requested to leave after an 8-month stint where he led the team to the top of the league. His exit followed reported interest from Libyan side Al Ittihad. Officials are assisting with his safe return to South Africa. And Mamelodi Sundowns head coach Miguel Cardoso says his side will rely on their experience and squad quality when they travel to face Stade Malien in the return leg of the CAF Champions League tie. Despite holding a 3-0 advantage from Friday night's victory in Tshwane, Cardoso is expecting a far more difficult encounter, particularly with the match set to be played on an artificial surface in conditions unlikely to suit Sundowns' usual style. He believes composure and experience will be key to managing the challenge.
Obviously, it will be a dry pitch. That makes the game slower in terms of capacity to take the ball out of the contacts that this team provokes. You saw in the first half 3 very ruthless faults, one on Tashreeq, one on Jayden, one on Tebsa. And also the temperature that we're going to have there is very high, so the rhythm will be slower. Obviously difficult to play the game we want to play, but obviously the experience that we have and the players that we have, if they have the right mindset, we can make a good game there and fight for a result. That's the obligation we have.
On to athletics. South African athletics legend Ezekiel Sipeng says the vision behind his maiden Sipeng Invitational, which will take place at the Park MacArthur Stadium in his hometown of Potchefstroom in the Northwest Province on the 7th of April. He says the meeting has already received recognition from World Athletics as a Continental Tour challenger, and he expects some of the best athletes from across Africa and beyond to compete.
You know, ASA had those 3 Grand Prix in the past. Yes. That was run by and the decision was taken that we need to release those events to be hosted outside. Because actually, last year we wanted to do the event, but we could not. We had to cancel it. So this year it happens that those events. Then I did a proposal.
Let's end with cricket news. India's one-day international captain Shubman Gill says winning next year's World Cup is the ultimate goal for his team, especially after they fell at the final hurdle in the 2023 edition on home soil. India's unbeaten campaign in that home World Cup ended in defeat by Australia in the final in Ahmedabad. India have since won back-to-back T20 World Cups, but Gills has set his sights on 50 overs cricket's biggest prize when the tournament takes place in South Africa, Zimbabwe and Namibia in October-November next year. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Coming up shortly, we have the business news, but just a reminder of how forward-looking Africa is in solving problems. Rwanda has pioneered the use of drones to deliver medical supplies such as blood and vaccines to remote clinics. The drone system dramatically reduced the delivery times from hours to minutes, saving lives in emergencies. And this innovation has attracted global attention and is now being replicated in other countries. There you go, Africa leading the way in innovative thinking.
Africa, meet Abedi.
Yeah, that's me.
Abedi is a music lover through and through.
I really love African music.
He's got a taste for all kinds of tunes and spends his days listening to Channel Africa. Guess what? He didn't know.
Okay.
Channel Africa wants to help Abedi and all music lovers everywhere to discover even more incredible music. That is why Channel Africa is calling on all African musicians to submit their music. Musicians, remember to give us all your relevant information. Make your submissions at music@channelafrica.co.za. Submissions are your chance to be heard on radio. But sadly, they do not guarantee that you will be playlisted. All submissions will be carefully reviewed to see if they meet our station's requirement. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
It's time now to find out what's been happening in the world of business, economics and commerce. And we say good morning to you, Nosipo Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, commodity trader Glencore has pulled sizable cobalt stocks from China's Wuxi exchange to honor commitments to electric vehicle battery makers in the country due to limited supply of the material. Now, London-listed Glencore supplies its Chinese clients with cobalt mined in the Democratic Republic of Congo. According to Dayton Commodities, the Central African country accounts for 72% of global supplies, estimated at nearly 268,000 metric tons last year. Congo's government suspended exports in February last year to support cobalt prices, which had dropped to 9-year lows. The suspension remained in place until Congo introduced export quotas last October. Economists, business managers and trade unions expect inflation in South Africa to average a record low of 3.6% over the next 5 years. The professional group who participated and surveyed by the Bureau for Economic Research expect inflation to decline slightly to 3.6% from a previous 3.7% in the period. Their expectations follows government's decision to anchor inflation at the new's 3% target. However, the survey shows that household inflation expectations rose slightly from 5.3% to 5.4%. An economist at the Bureau for Economic Research says the survey does not reflect the impact of the war in Iran as it preceded the conflict.
The households were surveyed before the attack of Israel and America on Iran, whilst the businesses and the other professional groups, most of them, 86% of them answered before the invasion, but the remaining 14% answered after this attack started. So the overall survey results would not really reflect this expected oil price or fuel price increases that we are going to see because of the oil price shock.
The Cooperative Governance, Human Settlements and Traditional Affairs COGTA Department in South Africa's Mpumalanga province says it is revising its support for municipalities struggling with their Eskom debt. 5 municipalities in the province, including Emalahleni, Govenbegi, Legwa, the city of Mbombela and Tabachweu, are among the 14 municipalities that owe a total of $3.68 billion. Our factors identified by the department as contributing to their inability to pay include high interest rates from Eskom, maintenance cost of aging infrastructure, and electricity theft. Cooperative Governance spokesperson Freddy Ngobe says the department is working with these municipalities to ensure uninterrupted services.
Also apply your IGR protocols between ISCOM, ourselves, and the municipality, where we ensure that they have a plan of repayment. We also assist municipalities with debt collection strategies to ensure that there must be other forms of revenue generation, not necessarily on infrastructure or on electricity. So with that, we're hopeful that they will be turning the tide, and we know that there's some who are not really affording owing to infrastructure which is aging, illegal electricity collections and so on. But at least that we constantly want them to ensure that at least at the end of the day they pay their part, and they also ensure that services are not affected.
Taxi operators affiliated to the Mogalakwena Taxi Forum at Mokopane in South Africa's Limpopo province have handed over a memorandum of grievances to senior managers at the world-leading platinum producer Valterra Platinum Mine. The taxi operators are demanding business opportunities from the mine. Valterra Platinum spokesperson Sina Pochani says they will comment after studying the memorandum. The forum spokesperson Khotso Bambo says the mine must empower local businesses.
The purpose of the march for today is to alert the mine that there's local businesses that must be empowered. So Mogalakwena Taxi Forum is the forum that was established by 11 local taxi associations. So all those taxi associations must be empowered. We don't want only one person to benefit from tender alone. We want most families to benefit. So that's what we are fighting for.
And finally, the body that advises the world central banks, the Bank for International Settlements, has urged policymakers not to overreact to the Iran crisis-driven spike in global energy prices, calling it a textbook case of when to look through a shock, especially if it proves temporary, and not react with monetary policy. This month's 40% surge in oil prices and near 60% leap in wholesale gas prices have evoked comparisons to 2022, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the post-COVID reopening of the global economy sent inflation rates soaring. This time, finance markets have been quick to reprice expectations, betting central banks won't want to make the same mistake again. Your financial indicators: one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 384. In Botswana is 13 Pula 49. In Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 28. And in Zambia, it's 19 Kwacha 51. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 Real 32. Russia is 80 rubles 10. India is 92 rupees 31. China is 6 yuan 89. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 16 rand 67. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,022 and platinum at $2,157 per ounce. While the price of Brent crude oil is at $103.13 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusipho Soma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Let's take a look at a few stories now, starting with this one. South Africa's Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, says that the ongoing US-Israel war could push fuel prices higher, warning that motorists should prepare for increased costs at the pump. He made the remarks at the Southern Africa Oil and Gas Conference, which is currently underway in Cape Town, where industry leaders, policymakers and investors are gathered to discuss the region's energy future and explore opportunities in Southern Africa's oil and gas sector. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Simosa is there and filed this report.
The gathering comes at a time of heightened geopolitical tensions and uncertainty in global oil markets, raising questions about energy security, investment, and the role Africa can play in stabilizing global supply. South Africa's Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, says while there is no immediate risk of fuel shortages, citizens should prepare to pay more at the pump.
Every discussion that we're having today
I'm sure you will all contribute in saying, how do we mitigate that reality? If Iran closes a strait and no oil goes through there, it means here we must clear ourselves for a higher price of oil. And the only thing that will save us in that is that conflict in the Middle East is impacting on the world, not on us. It impacts on the price of oil in the world.
The Director General of the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Jacob Mbele, says the current global conflicts highlight the need for Africa to accelerate the development of its own energy resources and refinery capabilities.
I don't think we're far from achieving exploiting our regional resources. The point I raised about where we get our crude oil, where we get our gas currently, is from the region in Mozambique. And I also think it's not about the region being on our own, but it's about the region exploiting the resources that we have so that we create options for ourselves, but even for the rest of the globe, because there are others who are actually scrambling for supply as well. And the region could actually be, this for me is an opportunity if the region was ready, for the region to actually assist the rest of the world as well.
But how important is regional cooperation in building energy security across Africa in fighting energy poverty?
I think regional partnership is key. Maybe let me first start by saying that what we've been indicating during this period in terms of where our supplies come from. For example, when you look at crude oil, our crude comes from West Africa. Obviously, if there are developments elsewhere in the continent, even in areas like Namibia, as a country and as part of the region, we would want to obviously see how we can be part of benefiting from that. But the discoveries that you are seeing happening in Namibia, in the Orange Basin, are also an indication of what's available on the South African side. So regional cooperation becomes important for us to maximize and get critical mass or critical volumes that we need to get the projects off the ground.
As global energy markets remain uncertain, industry leaders say Africa must accelerate the development of its own energy resources to strengthen energy security and drive economic growth. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Cape Town, South Africa.
Trade experts say that the United States is pivoting to a new legal strategy to impose tariffs on its global partners, following a significant blow to President Donald Trump's economic agenda. This comes after the U.S. Supreme Court struck down a key pillar of the administration's tariff policy in February, ruling that the president exceeded his authority under emergency laws. In a fresh move, the U.S. has now announced a targeted probe into whether 60 nations, including South Africa, are doing enough to block goods produced with forced labor. The investigation has raised fears of looming trade restrictions and new duties for South African exporters. Nosipo Khadebe has the details.
The US has launched a probe into whether more than a dozen of its major trading partners have done enough to block goods made with forced labor into their own markets. International trade lawyer Kulufelo Kugler says the move underscores Washington's growing willingness to deploy its full trade policy arsenal to police global supply chains. This comes after the US Supreme Court struck down a key part of President Donald Trump's tariffs policies in February.
On the 24th of February, the Section 122 tariffs came into force, whereby the Trump administration levied a 10% duty on all countries. As you know, that measure will expire in 150 days from the day that it was imposed. So essentially by midnight on the 24th of July, 2026. So essentially these investigations seek to counteract the expiry of those Section 122 tariffs. That instrument is not meant to be used forever, but essentially Section 301 can be used for quite a long time. You remember that the same instrument was used to impose tariffs on China, and this started off back in 2018, and they're still in force.
South Africa is among the countries being reviewed as part of the inquiry, including the European Union, China, Japan, Canada, Mexico, India, Taiwan, and the UK. Kugler says the country could be facing tariffs.
Essentially, it means that there will be additional tariffs. So as you know, the EPA tariffs essentially struck off those 30% tariffs that South African exporters were facing in the US. And even though they still have that 10% Section 122, after this investigation, anywhere probably from May, we will know how high or what type of tariff will be applied on those different countries. It is not clear whether they'll be the same for all countries. This investigation is still ongoing, but there is, of course, opportunity for any interested parties, including South African exporters or the government, to make any submissions to the USTR, maybe to mitigate the tariffs that will be imposed.
The inquiry is expected to focus on sectors including textiles and apparel, agriculture, mining and critical minerals, and some manufactured goods. Nosipho Khatebe, SABC News, Johannesburg.
6:51 Central Africa time. Coming up shortly, find out why President Cyril Ramaphosa says that there needs to be greater cooperation across the southern and the rest of the continent in terms of investment in infrastructure. That's coming up shortly.
Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Malawi's President Peter Mutharika has directed that a fresh inquiry be conducted into the plane crash that claimed the life of former Vice President Saulos Clauser, political analyst Undule Mwakasangula. Undule, what are they politically and institutional factors that may have influenced President Peter Mutharika's decision to order a fresh inquiry into the crash?
Let me start by saying that the death of the former president and 8 others was a painful national tragedy. You know, public trust is very important. If people feel that the first report left gaps, the president may believe that a fresh inquiry could restore confidence and provide closure. So the decision by the president may be influenced by public pressure, but also the need to rebuild trust in the state institutions.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has called for stronger collaboration and investment in transport infrastructure to support economic growth in South Africa and across the continent. The President was delivering the keynote address at the inaugural National Transport Conference held in the Midrand just north of Johannesburg. And this three-day conference brought together a number of stakeholders to support to explore ways of building an efficient transport system that supports trade, mobility and development. Our reporter Lebohang Mabange has more.
Leaders in government and the transport sector have gathered in Midrand, north of Johannesburg, for the inaugural National Transport Conference, a platform aimed at finding solutions to strengthen transport systems in South Africa and improve regional connectivity across the African continent. Delivering the keynote address, President Cyril Ramaphosa highlighted the importance of transport in driving economic growth and connecting communities to opportunities.
The transport sector is integral to our effort to make economic growth work for everyone. It is essential for getting goods from our factories, from our mines, from our farms to markets here and abroad. By the same measure, it is vital for the development of our rural areas, enabling farmers to get their produce also to the market in a country where the majority of its people was deliberately removed and settled far from economic opportunities.
Ramaphosa also noted that the conference comes at a time when global trade dynamics are rapidly changing, requiring countries to adapt their transport and logistics systems.
The geopolitical environment is shifting rapidly, in fact, on an hourly basis. Old trade routes are being redrawn and supply chains are also being reconfigured. Other countries on our continent are investing aggressively in their own rail and port infrastructure, creating both competition and opportunity. And it is for us as the largest economy, not only in our region, but also on the continent, to be supportive, to be collaborative, and to act in unison with them.
The conference is also focusing on integrating different transport modes to improve the movement of people and goods. Minister of Transport Barbara Creasy says the sector has a key role to play in achieving the country's development priorities.
Our ecosystem has a central role to play in achieving the 3 strategic priorities of our medium-term development plan. As a department, we have developed 6 main priorities to integrate the transport and mobility environment and ensure that every mode of transport has a role to play in the safe, efficient, and effective movement of people, goods, and services.
Provincial leaders also used the platform to highlight efforts to improve public transport systems. Gauteng Premier Panyaza Lesufi says the province has been working to strengthen integrated transport planning.
Transport remains the lifeblood of national development, and the Gauteng government has recognized this truth long ago. Back in 2016, the Gauteng provincial government established what we call the Transport Authority for Gauteng, with the aim of creating a formal entity to oversee integrated public transport systems in the province. Even back then, it was clear that migration and rapid urbanization continue to strain public services and transport networks. Therefore, the Transport Authority for Gauteng, or TAC, has since been leading efforts to improve transport systems in our province.
The conference is expected to produce recommendations aimed at improving infrastructure, strengthening logistics networks, and enhancing regional trade connectivity. Reporting for Channel Africa, I am Lebogang Mabange in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Right, let's take you back in history. It was a significant day in South Africa on this day in 1992. For some of us with grey hair, we remember that day very well because it was quite a significant day in terms of the trajectory that the country was taking on. So there was something called the whites-only referendum, and it was historic. It was a yes-no vote. White South Africans went to the polls to decide whether to support President F.W. de Klerk's reforms to end the apartheid system. The result was a landslide. 68.7% of people voted yes, and this mandate was a critical turning point that effectively ended white minority political veto power and cleared the path for the final constitutional negotiations with Nelson Mandela and the ANC. Because what was happening at the time in the country, F.W. de Klerk had just taken over as president of the country, and he released Nelson Mandela, and he was now saying we need to end apartheid. But a lot of the political parties, the white ones in particular, in the country says, you can't do that. You don't have a mandate of the people of South Africa. They voted on other issues. So he says, okay, I'm going to go get the mandate. And that's when he had the referendum. Only white people could vote in this referendum. And as I said, it was a 68.7% vote. And so the conversations began with Nelson Mandela and others. And negotiations took place that led to 1994, when South Africa eventually saw a full democratic state. A lot of people say that South Africans, white South Africans, just wanted to get back into the international community in terms of things like sport. And of course, I think it was 1993. South Africa went to play cricket in the World Cup there for the very first time. So who knows? But it was a significant moment in time. March the 17th, 1992, the yes-no referendum. You are listening to Channel Africa's Rise and Shine with Peter Ndoro. This is the second hour of the program, and we begin with the news with Jwalani Tulo Mwepe. Good morning.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Kenyan Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi says Moscow and Nairobi have agreed that Kenyan nationals will no longer fight for Russia in Ukraine. Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago and has faced fierce resistance from the much smaller Ukrainian army. Mudavadi held talks with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Moscow. A Kenyan intelligence report presented to lawmakers in February said that more than 1,000 Kenyans had been recruited to fight on Russia's side in Moscow's war in Ukraine. Kaeli Kumalo has the story.
Kenyan Foreign Minister Mudavadi says the two countries have agreed that Kenyans shall not be enlisted through the Russian Ministry of Defense. He says consular services will be organized for those requiring assistance. Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov says Kenyan citizens had voluntarily signed contracts to fight alongside the Russian army. Some Kenyan politicians have described what they say is a network of rogue state officials who have colluded with human trafficking syndicates to recruit Kenyans to fight for Russia in Ukraine.
The refusal by South Africa's Justice Sisi Khampepe to step down as chairperson of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission Cases Inquiry should be declared unlawful simply because it was not taken by the Commission heads as a collective. This is the argument set forth by former President Jacob Zuma in the review application of Khampepe's decision at the High Court in Johannesburg. Counsel for Zuma, Advocate Dalim Mpofu, says because the decision was not taken by a properly constituted panel, including Commissioners Diale Khomo and Advocate Andrea Gabriel, it cannot stand in law and Khampepe must go.
The ruling, which brings us all here, was only signed by the chairperson and was only produced by her and not by the commission. Just as this panel is sitting here, if tomorrow a judgment comes that says only Justice Bakwa is giving this and we don't know what the other two judges had to say, that by definition cannot be called the decision of the court. Remember, we live in a democracy of transparency. So we also need to know, so does this court, need to know, for example, whether Justice Homo or Advocate Gabriel SC agreed or did not agree.
The Pan-South African Language Board, PANSALB, says it's taking steps to ensure the integration of African languages into South African society. The board was reacting to criticism from Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture Minister Gayton McKenzie of the perceived slow integration of these languages. PANSALB has been hosting a 2-day National Language Summit in Cape Town. PANSALB says while language integration efforts may seem slow, efforts are underway. PANSALB Board Chairperson Professor Loli Makubo Badenost.
We are doing it, be it in business, be in academia. For instance, ABSA, if I'm withdrawing my money, I'm getting it in cases. If I'm going to the universities, the government has invested and they've put ring fence money for us because we complain. And then some universities have already started teaching in their mother tongue, not only in higher education, even in school, the mother tongue-based education. We are moving slowly but surely. And the South African Sign Language, who would have thought that it would be one of the 12 official languages? It is our force. We are moving.
The U.S. State Department is reportedly considering withholding life-saving assistance to people living with HIV in Zambia as a negotiating tactic to force the government there to sign a deal, giving the United States more access to its critical minerals. The New York Times reported this development after obtaining a copy of a memo prepared for U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio by the department's Africa Bureau. Zimbabwe earlier rejected a health deal with the U.S. over demands for sensitive biological data. Sharon Bryce Pease reports that the Trump administration has signed bilateral health deals worth almost $20 billion with at least 18 African countries, including Lesotho and Botswana.
The Times quotes from a draft memo that the United States would secure their priorities by demonstrating a willingness to publicly take support away from Zambia on a massive scale. The report suggests Washington is seeking to undercut Beijing's unfettered access to Zambia's mineral wealth. Lusaka in February pushed back on elements in the proposed MOU that included $1 billion in U.S. funding over 5 years to tackle HIV and malaria in the country, which would also require $340 million in co-financing from Zambia's government. That government insisted that the arrangement was focused on health, but that they remained open to engagements mutually agreed on and fully aligned with the country's national interests.
And finally, more European leaders have rejected President Donald Trump's demands for help securing the passage of ships through the Strait of Hormuz, which is under an Iranian blockade. After a meeting of EU foreign ministers, the bloc's foreign policy chief, Kaja Kallas, explained Europe's reluctance.
This is not Europe's war, and this situation in the region, we have the Operation Aspides in the Red Sea. The discussion was that it should be strengthened because it doesn't have too many naval assets. It should have more. But the discussion on whether we are also extending this mandate to cover the Strait of Hormuz, there was no appetite from the member states to do that.
For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Jolani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And a sports headline, Asian Football Confederation says Iran is still playing in the World Cup 2026 despite withdrawal rumors. And former Australian tennis number 1 and coach has been handed a 4-year ban for doping offences. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
A very good morning to you. You're listening to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. I'm Peter Ndoro. Asanda Beda is away today. Stay connected to Africa and the world with Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. And you can listen or watch, actually, anytime, anywhere at channelafrica.co.za. And you can also catch us on your mobile apps. Just look for SABC Plus in your app store. And you can also listen via the following audio bouquets, DSTV or OpenView. And you can also catch us on social media at Channel Africa on Facebook and at Channel Africa 1 on all the other platforms. So what's coming up in this second hour of the program? Well, we unpack a major diplomatic move as Kenya heads to Moscow, securing a pledge from Russia to stop recruiting African fighters in the Ukraine war. What does this mean for Africa's place in a shifting global order? We'll be unpacking that. And then an historic moment in South Sudan where centuries-old customary laws are being rewritten to outlaw forced marriages and protect children. Could this reshape justice systems across the continent? We're going to find out, and that's what's coming up. And don't forget, Channel Africa is first with the African story globally.
Stella Longwe. Pamalonje.
Jedu abati ndikatswiri oimba wa dziko la Mozambique ameneyu amenali Rikabana. Ndatiuzeni kuti maimba shamba shanji komanso dzina lanu lenileni koleka ngati dzina limeneli ndi Jedu atapa stage. Dzina lanu kwenikweni ndi ndani komanso maimba shamba shanji?
Ineyo dzina langa lenileni ndine Ricardo Musa Rabana. Chamba chimene ndi maimba ine ndi manganji ndimakonda kwambiri ma tradition zimenezo ndi nyimbo zathu chifukwa kwathu kunoko ndi madansi osiyana-siyana achimizi ndi ineyo poti ndi mnyamata wa chimizi ndi ndimakondanso nyimbo za chimizi.
Ndinu achimizi? Ndi makondanso nyimbo za chimizi, mapangaso za chimizi. Zosangasa kuti mwanena bwera kuti ndinu achimizi anthu amazibisa anthu amafuna kukhala ndithu achitauni koma chikhalidwe edu chilibe chitauni alisa ndi chikhalidwe chake alisa ndi zimene amakonda.
Malonje pa nthawi ya 6 koloko kufikira 7 koloko madzulo. Lowiruka ndi Stella Longwe. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Kenya is recalibrating its relationship with Russia at a delicate moment in global geopolitics. Foreign Minister Musalia Mudavadi is in Moscow for high-level talks with his counterpart Sergei Lavrov, focusing on trade, labor cooperation, and crucially the fate of Kenyan nationals reportedly recruited to fight in Russia-Ukraine war. Nairobi says that Moscow has now agreed to halt the recruitment whilst efforts are underway to bring affected citizens back home. But beyond this immediate issue, the visit does raise broader questions about Kenya's foreign policy direction and Africa's positioning in an increasingly polarized world. Well, to unpack this, I'm now joined by Gordon Kachola, who's a foreign policy analyst and CEO of the Africa Center for Diplomatic Affairs in Nairobi. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Good morning, Peter.
All right, so first of all, how significant is this visit by Mr. Mudavadi and for Kenya's diplomatic engagement with Russia?
Well, the visit doesn't come as a surprise. The visit in itself, I would say, is long overdue, based on the developments that have been happening across between these two countries. Remember, Kenya has always pronounced non-aligned, has always projected itself as an unaligned country. However, in action, Kenya has always been pro-West. Lately, from the year 2013 onwards, Kenya has always taken a position of, we are neither looking east nor west, we are looking forward. Whoever wants to do business with us will come to us and we will go to them. So I don't think this is late. I think it is timely, and also based on the fact that we've had recently many young Kenyans go to Russia and are enlisted in the military. Some unknowingly they leave their country here in Kenya, go to those places, just later on to be told that, hey, you are already recruited into the military. I think that alone was worth a negotiation between these two countries so that Kenyans don't lose their lives in a war that they have nothing to do with.
It is interesting that this development has taken place where Russia has said that it would stop recruitment. I think there were denials at some point that they were doing this, and it sounded as if there were private institutions that were moving people in and out of the country and ending up on the front line. Beyond Kenya, might this have a ripple effect with other African countries facing a similar situation, South Africa being one of them?
Definitely. We all understand the fact that how machineries work. No country go directly to recruit. They get a company that definitely will recruit people or enlist people into the military. So there is nowhere where a country directly gets involved in this. But now, Kenya taking this step will definitely make other African countries to also say, hey, we don't want our people get into this. So it is now upon the company or the organization that is enlisting these young people, because no country gets into that directly. So it's upon the organization that is enlisting these young people to now put a halt into that, so that they also do not jeopardize the relationship of Russia and other African countries. As you now know, that Russia is looking into Africa more than ever. You look at the Central African region, Russia is seemingly taking over from other colonialists. So it is almost certain that this may tilt how the enlisting into the Russian military happens within Africa. But having said that, I think it was also time for Kenya to do this, because remember, Kenya's main export is tea and coffee. That is its backbone of in terms of exportation. And then Another one that is cropping up hugely today is people who workforce. Kenya tries to take a lot of its citizens out there to work, and the remittances are huge. I think today remittances from Kenyans abroad back to Kenya go to almost 1 trillion Kenyan shillings. So that is something that they can't ignore. They want to protect their people who are outside the country. But remember, when the war in Sudan broke, Kenya lost a market in tea. Now, Kenya is also losing a market in Iran in terms of tea and coffee. So they can't stand and watch as they are losing market in tea and coffee. They will have to find an alternative. If you look at the import of Russian coffee, it's almost over 15 billion US dollars a year. In that, Kenya has only roughly 46 million US dollars a year. So Kenya is looking at how can we again find alternatives for our produce that we export in Russia and other countries, because we've lost that in some of these countries. So I think even this issue of enlisting young Kenyans into the Russian military came just as a by the way and a strong by the way, having noted that Kenya is losing markets due to the global catastrophes in war, and now they have to find alternatives for their exports.
Right. So this is the other strategic objectives that Kenya might be pursuing then between the two countries. Apart from trade, what else might be on the table?
We all know that after independence, there was the first Kenyan vice president, Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, was a communist in aligning. He was a communist in thought, communist in action. And that tells you why in his backyard where he comes from, that the western part of Kenya, the Russians built one of the biggest medical facility, which is today a level 6 facility, one of the highest medical facilities. And for the longest, it was called Russia Hospital. So Russia lost that to the Westerns after the exit of Jaramogi from power and subsequently his death. And they are trying to find a foot here in Kenya and the rest of Africa. Just like today, you realize that France is trying to find a foot in East Africa after its fair share of trouble within the West Africa. And they have spotted Kenya as a possible landing site for the East African region, the larger Eastern African region and the Great Lakes region. So even Russia is trying to find a foothold within the Eastern African region. And who is better suited for that if not Kenya? So they have spotted Kenya, and I think these conversations will go deeper. In the coming days, we may see Minister Lavrov, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Lavrov come to Kenya, and subsequent visits may be with President William Ruto to Russia, so that to deepen some of these ties and get what they can get. It's a give and take from Russia.
I know that at the beginning you said that Kenya had always chosen to be non-aligned, but there's no question that Kenya and the US have enjoyed an especially close relationship. Could this be Russia trying to muscle in on this relationship? And I wonder if the US is looking at this visit by Kenya to Russia and saying, yeah, but remember who your friends are.
If you're a Christian, you also know that even if truly hell exists, which some of us believe it does, even the devil itself would not want to be dethroned from hell. So no one wants to be dethroned from their seat of power. Definitely, America will not sit pretty. You remember last time when President Ruto went to China and had an official state visit, it brought a lot of trouble, and there was there were threats in the US Senate that they need to relook into the Kenyan-US relationship. Even this, definitely it will bring trouble to Kenya. at least to some degree, because Kenya has always pronounced herself as non-aligned, but in action, no. Kenya is never non-aligned, though in pronunciation, that has been the case. I know definitely for sure that should this kind of conversation, negotiation intensify, and should it appear that Russia is gaining foot here in Kenya and the region, East Africa, because Kenya is the gateway to East Africa, definitely it will brew some trouble from the Western partners of Kenya.
All right, Gordon, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. Your insights greatly appreciated on the program.
Thank you very much, Peter.
That was Gordon Kachola, foreign policy analyst and CEO of the African Center for Diplomatic Affairs in Nairobi, talking to us about this visit by Kenya to Russia and bringing back home their boys that are caught in the Russia-Ukraine war, and also stopping the recruitment of others.
Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters, a platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
In a landmark move that could reshape justice at the community level, South Sudan has updated parts of its customary legal system for the first time in more than 80 years. The revised Naath law, used across Jonglei, Unity and Upper Nile states, introduces major changes, including limits on dowries, stronger protections for children, and the abolition of forced marriages. Backed by the United Nations mission in South Sudan, these reforms aim to align long-standing traditions with modern human rights standards. But what will this mean in practice for communities, and these changes, can they truly take hold? Well, to discuss this, I'm now joined by Anis Ahmed, who's the chief of the Rule of Law section at the United Nations mission in South Sudan. Thank you very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Anis, just how significant is this reform of the Naath customary law, and why do you think it's taken more than 80 years for these changes to happen?
You know, South Sudan just became independent almost 15 years ago, and there are almost 62 different ethnic communities in this country, and most of them are governed by their own laws. And also, they're scattered in different parts of the country. As a result, communities scattered in different parts of the country also follow different sets of these laws while retaining the basic precepts. So I think one of the major communities, which is the Nuer community, which is also called the Naath community, adopted this through a community-led process. And I think every community reaches a conclusion that it needs a proper, discernible, identifiable law that should govern its community. One of the interesting parts of the South Sudanese constitutional scheme is that customary law is considered as part and parcel of the legal system. Customary law governs a lot of things like marriages, divorces, alimony, property disputes, etc. And I think that integration between customary and statutory law works well if both of them are properly discernible and known to people. And I think this community-led process has contributed in that direction. The last such consolidation happened in 1932 in the so-called Fungak law. Thereafter, everything has been existing in the form of either oral traditions or written traditions which have not been consolidated. So I think this is a community-led process, which is very welcome, because then it will lead to ensuring that the laws that the community considers itself to be governed by are consistent with international standards, as you just described, outlying child marriage, discouraging bride price, discouraging revenge killings, discouraging collective punishment, outlying completely forced marriages, etc. So I think it's a positive development, and it's not government-led; it's community-led, which speaks a lot to the development of community and its maturity.
You mentioned community-led. Chiefs, I believe, were involved, community leaders, women's groups. Why was this so important for this to happen? Is it that customary law is pretty central to life in this part of the continent?
Yes, because the statutory courts are not completely available or accessible to a lot of citizens of the country. Therefore, customary chiefs play a very important role, both in respect of legal matters, but also in respect of providing support to the communities in its general matters also. So I think it was very important that this customary law that governs a major part of the civil system, which is marriage, divorce, as I said, alimony, property rights, is properly codified so that citizens can then enforce them rather than enforcing their rights through violent means. So I think the idea that they decide matters through legal, peaceful means rather than through non-legal, violent means was something that the community felt was important. And all the chiefs of 16 Nuer majority counties got together, discussed it over a long period, upwards of 6 months, took it back to the community, had extensive community consultations, and thereafter, last December, adopted it in a community-led process in which almost all the Nuer elders were present. So I think it was a very consensual, democratic, community-led process, which I think should be emulated by other communities, although other communities also have codified customary laws. But I think they also face the same problems. Either they are outdated, they're not consistent with modern human rights standards, or they are scattered such that people don't know what applies to them, or in respect of conflict, they don't know which part of the law governs them. So I think it's a gradual process which we have supported. So our role has been only from outside, supporting, catalytic, but it's a completely community-led process.
I mean, some of the changes are pretty major shifts in things that have been happening for centuries. Introducing law is one thing, and enforcing it and making sure that people respect it is another one. Are you happy that or confident that these changes will hold?
I believe they will hold, and it's a work in progress. Now we will start the process of training the chiefs across the country, or at least across the Nuer majority parts of the country, so that they are fully aware of this. It's already being translated into the Nuer language. And then, of course, there'll have to be consultation processes so that these are then adopted by the majority of people. They are of it. We will circulate the copies of this law. So I think it's a work in progress, but it's a good development which we can build upon, and the community itself can take that lead through our support and the support of everyone else who's interested in advancement of a proper functioning legal system in this country.
Could the South Sudan experience perhaps offer a model for other African countries that are grappling with modernizing customary laws?
Absolutely. Dowry is a major problem in this part of the world. Dowry is converted into cows, and that leads to a lot of violence in respect to the so-called cattle raiding here. Cattle raiding is a major trigger of violence and conflict. So if dowry is reduced or controlled, if bride price is controlled, if collective punishment is controlled, if marriages become consensual rather than family-led, so I think it will lead to a major reduction in violence in this part of the world, and improvement and to my mind, to use your word, modernization of the customary law, which I believe is the attempt of this process.
Anis, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much indeed for joining us and giving us some insights on this significant development.
Thank you for having me.
That was Anis Ahmed, who's the chief of the Rule of Law section at UN Mission in South Sudan, UNMISS, sharing insights on the historic reforms to the Naath customary law in South Sudan. Perhaps lessons for other countries on the continent in terms of modernizing long-held traditional beliefs, perhaps that don't serve us well. It's 7:30. It's time for your news headlines. Good morning once again to you, Jwalane Tulongwepe.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines. Bellarmine Mugabe, son of former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, and his co-accused Tobias Matonze are back in the Alexandra Regional Court in Johannesburg, South Africa this morning, where plea negotiations are expected to begin. The US State Department is reportedly considering withholding life-saving assistance to people living with HIV in Zambia as a negotiating tactic to force the government there to sign a deal giving the United States more access to its critical minerals. And finally, the European Union has announced it will deliver more than $500 million in humanitarian aid to Middle Eastern countries and regional states hosting refugees. I will have details on these and other stories at 8 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
It's time now to find out what's happening in the world of sports. And good morning once again, Fikile Lingwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. Let's start off with football news. The Asian Football Confederation, AFC, says it has not received any notification from Iran that it will withdraw its national football team from the FIFA World Cup 2026. Iran have qualified for the 48-team tournament in the United States, Canada and Mexico starting on the 11th of June until the 19th of July, are scheduled to play 2 group matches in Los Angeles and 1 in Seattle. Iran's sports minister has said it was impossible for the players to participate in the tournament after the US launched airstrikes with Israel against Iran, killing its supreme leader. US President Donald Trump said last week that Iran was welcome to participate in the World Cup, but he believed it was not appropriate that they be there for their own life and safety. An official withdrawal by Iran from football's global showpiece will be the first in the modern era and would leave FIFA with the urgent task of finding a replacement. More football news. South African coach Rulani Mokoena has been cleared to leave Algeria following a brief detention in Haouri Boumediene Airport regarding alleged currency regulation violations. According to social media posts, he has officially departed Algerian side MC Alger after a mutual termination of his contract shortly after his arrest. Head of Public Diplomacy for South Africa, Clayson Munyela, confirmed that Mokoena was cleared, safe and staying in a hotel following the airport issue. It is reported Mokoena requested to leave after an 8-month stint where he led the team to the top of the league. His exit followed reported interest from Libyan side Al Ittihad. Officials are assisting with his safe return to South Africa. On to athletics. South African athletics legend Ezekiel Sipeng says the idea of hosting his own meeting has been a long-held dream, and he worked tirelessly behind the scenes to turn it into reality. With just a few weeks to go before the inaugural event, Sipeng says it is a proud moment for him to see the meet finally coming to life in the town that shaped his career. He believes the event will not only celebrate his legacy, but also create opportunities for the next generation of athletes to compete at a high level on home soil.
I mean, if you look at the road running in South Africa, most of the events are organized privately, and there's a lot of consistency there. So that's what pushed us, and myself, and I said, look, I would like to do a meeting in our hometown, Potchefstroom. And here we are now. We have that meeting, there's no turning back.
And finally, Australian former tennis player and coach Marinko Matosevic has been handed a 4-year ban after breaching anti-doping rules. Matosevic reached a career-high singles ranking of 39 in 2013. He retired from the sport in 2018 and has since become a coach, working with Australian players Chris O'Connell and Jordan Thompson. There is no suggestion of O'Connell or Thompson having breached any rules. In a statement published by the Australian tennis website, The First Serve in February, Matosevic admitted he underwent a blood transfusion in Morelos, Mexico, towards the end of his playing career. In the same statement, Matosevic slammed the ITIA's methods, calling them corrupt. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Figede Ngwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
All right, coming up, we're going to be taking a look at a number of issues, and one of them actually is going to be around petroleum, if you want the full name. And of course, there's concerns given what's happening in the Iran-Israel-US conflict. We'll be unpacking what it might mean for you where you are on the continent. Stay with us for that. The business news is coming up.
Let's just do it.
Your life just got easier. Get the Channel Africa app and take us wherever you go. Catch the latest news, enjoy your favorite shows, stream the music you love, and stay connected to the continent. All in one spot, right in your pocket. Simple, quick, and always with you. The Channel Africa app. Download it now on iOS and Android.
Okay, let's find out what's happening in business, and we say good morning to Nosipho Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, the Communications Workers Union here in South Africa is calling on the government to ensure the allocation of the budget it had promised for the implementation of the business rescue plan at the South African Post Office. The call follows the announcement by the business rescue practitioners that they plan to seek the liquidation of the post office. Government had pledged to allocate just over $238 million to fully implement the business rescue plan at the post office. However, the funds have not yet been released. The union's Nathan Bowers says workers are prepared to protest if the liquidation action is affected.
The national leadership of the Communication Workers Union will meet to discuss our response. And already we are saying that we are going to go to the streets. Our workers are ready to take action. There is no way that the Communication Workers Union is going to allow that the People's Post Office goes down.
Economists, business managers and trade unions expect inflation in South Africa to average a record low of 3.6% over the next 5 years. The professional group who participated in surveyed by the Bureau for Economic Research expected inflation to decline slightly to 3.6% from a previous 3.7% in the period. The expectations follows government's decision to anchor inflation at the new's 3% target. However, the survey shows that household inflation expectations rose slightly from 5.3% to 5.4%. An economist at the Bureau for Economic Research says the survey does not reflect the impact of the war in Iran, as its participation preceded the conflict.
The households were surveyed before the attack of Israel and America on Iran, whilst the businesses and the other professional groups, most of them, 86% of them answered before the invasion, but the remaining 14% answered after this attack started. So the overall survey results would not really reflect this expected oil price or fuel price increases that we are going to see because of the oil price shock.
Nigeria's headline consumer inflation slowed slightly in February to 15.06% year-on-year from 15.10% in January. It was the 11th consecutive monthly slowdown, though the declines were marginal in January and February. The Abu Dhabi National Oil Company has suspended the loading of oil at the port of Fujairah after an Iranian drone attack sparked fires at the terminal. The port is located outside the Strait of Hormuz, which has been effectively blockaded by Iran. A drone targeting Dubai's international airport temporarily stopped air traffic. Qatar has also been intercepting Iranian missiles. In Doha, the BBC's Barbara Platt-Asher says people are concerned about their future.
Privately, people have said to me that they are anxious about the future. They don't know what this means long term for their jobs, for the economy, for all the international links that drive the business model here. But I think the fact that the Qataris have been successful in intercepting most, if almost all, of the missiles and drones has given people a sense of reassurance. And that is what they were telling me when I went to the market yesterday.
And finally, the body that advises the World Central Bank, the Bank for International Settlements, has urged policymakers not to overreact to the Iran crisis-driven spike in global energy prices, calling it a textbook case of when to look through a shock, especially if it proves temporary, and not react with monetary policy. This month's 40% surge in oil prices and near 60% leap in wholesale gas prices have evoked comparisons to 2022, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the post-COVID reopening of the global economy sent inflation rates soaring. This time, financial markets have been quick to reprise expectations, betting central banks won't want to make the same mistake again. Your financial indicators: one US dollar in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 384. In Botswana is 13 Pula 49. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 28. And in Zambia, it's 19 Kwacha 51. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 Ro 32. Russia is 80 rubles at 10. India is 92 rupees 31. China is 6 yuan 89. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 16 rand 67. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,022 and platinum at $2,157 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $103.13 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusipho Zuma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
7:42 Central African Time. You're listening to Channel Africa's Rise and Shine with Peter Ndoro. Let's take a look at this story that takes us to South Africa, where trade unions in the country are representing workers at ferrochrome producer Samancor will engage the company in efforts to reduce the number of employees to be retrenched at the company's smelters. Samancor issued retrenchment notices that envisage the retrenchment of around 2,400 employees across its smelter operations and corporate office. It cites electricity costs as the reason for its decision. Though Eskom granted them a decrease of 63 cents per kilowatt per hour. Tumeleng Khajane has more.
One of Samanco's operations is the Dikwena smelters, situated in Brits in the Northwest Province. Here, employees also face possible retrenchments, and labor unions hope to convince the employer to reduce the number. The trade union UASA's Niku van Rooyen hopes they can save some jobs.
We will enter into discussions with Samancor and see where we can minimize the retrenchments. And obviously we will negotiate for better packages, because remember, the affected areas will be the smelter, the supply chain and head office. And so that is what we will do from our side. So we will we will fight this and see how many jobs we can save.
Veli Venter of Solidarity Union says more could have been done to consult the stakeholders before arriving at the decision.
We were of the firm belief as Solidarity that we are very close to finding that solution with the recent announcement by the Minister of Electricity that there's a 62 cents per kilowatt hour tariff on the table with some terms and conditions though, but that there was a solution and light at the end of the tunnel for these companies and many other companies just to be confronted with a notification that Samanco wants to proceed with retrenchments. We are obviously going to be part and parcel of the Section 189A retrenchment process.
Labour expert Pula Hela Mahuku says these types of engagements may produce better results for the workers.
When one reads the media statement, one can view this as a fait accompli. But if parties can go into the processes with an open mind and not have positional bargaining kind of thing, we believe that even if they don't save 2,400 jobs as anticipated, they might save quite a number of jobs in this regard.
In a statement, Samanco says it is committed to engage in this process transparently and in good faith. Itumeleng Khajane, Breads.
US President Donald Trump has warned that NATO faces a very bad future if allies fail to support US efforts to secure the Strait of Hormuz. Over the weekend, President Trump also called specifically on China, France, Japan and South Korea to secure the strait with an announcement on a potential coalition of countries to police the waterway expected sometime this week. But those details remain slim for now, as allies have taken a very cautious approach to joining the US-Israeli war against Iran. Showen Bricebees has more from New York.
The message from the White House is clear. NATO allies should stand with the United States in securing the Strait of Hormuz, warning of negative consequences were those allies not to acquiesce. White House Press Secretary Carolyn Levitt.
These countries are absolutely benefiting from ensuring that Iran can never obtain a nuclear weapon. This is something not just the United States, but the entire Western world has agreed with for many, many years. So I think the president is absolutely right to call on these countries to do more, to help the United States to reopen the Strait of Hormuz so that we can stop this terrorist regime from restricting the free flow of energy. And the fact that they are doing so just underscores why President Trump needed to take this action in the first place. The president spoke on that last night. He said that he wished the UK had stepped up sooner and quicker, but he continues to speak with our allies in Europe and is calling on them to do more, just as he did when he called on them to step up with respect to their defense spending in NATO.
Pressure from escalating energy costs has elevated concern both in the United States and around the world, with Brent crude oil surging to $106 before retreating to above $90 a barrel. The response from NATO allies to help secure the Strait of Hormuz has been tepid at best, Japan and Australia signalling they would not agree. South Korea says it's weighing the request, while China has been non-committal despite threats from President Trump to delay a summit meeting with President Xi Jinping at the end of March. Europe has largely signaled a defensive posture in relation to any assistance in the war, but Germany's Defense Minister Boris Pistorius was more direct.
Was erwartet die Welt, was erwartet Donald Trump von einer...
What does the world expect? What does Donald Trump expect from, let's say, a handful or two handfuls of European frigates in the Strait of Hormuz that the powerful American Navy cannot accomplish there alone? That's the question I ask myself. And before we make a decision, outside of NATO territory, by the way, we would need both an international framework and a mandate from the German Bundestag. I would think about that very carefully before we take that step, and I see absolutely no reason to do so. It's not our war. We didn't start it. We want diplomatic solutions and a swift end.
Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi argued that the Strait of Hormuz remained open, but closed to his country's enemies.
The Americans are asking other countries to come and help them so that the Strait of Hormuz remains open, which, of course, from our perspective, it is open. It is only closed to our enemies, to those who carried out unjust aggression against our country, and to their allies. We have not sent any message to the US. We are not asking for a ceasefire, but this war must come to an end in a way that it will not be repeated again.
As the trajectory of the war remains an open question, listen to Professor of International Relations at Cologne University, Clemens Fischer.
It is quite evident that the US and Israel thought it might be a very short war. We might call it a limited war, which means they go in and it takes 3 or 4 days and Iran will kind of capitulate and answer with symbolic forces. This is certainly not the case, as we can see now after 2 weeks. So they have miscalculated the reaction of Iran, which obviously has prepared for that day for more than 40 years. One can, of course, win a war like that militarily, but the costs are rising every single day, not only when it comes to personnel and for money, but in particular the political price will be extremely high because the Americans have lost the myth being the supreme power in the Gulf region.
The Cato Institute estimates that the United States has spent some $19 billion on the conflict to date, while more than 2,000 lives have been lost in the region, 1,300 in Iran, over 800 in Lebanon, more than a dozen Israelis, 13 US service members, around 20 deaths in Gulf states, amid tens of thousands of injuries and mass displacement, as calls for a ceasefire take a backseat to the continued military escalation. I'm Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York.
All right, so that story there from Sherwin Bryce-Pease in New York, taking us through these significant developments. So, yeah, you know me. I love to show off about African innovation, and there's a young Malawian innovator, William Kamkwamba, who built a wind turbine from scrap materials in his village to generate electricity for his home. His invention powered lights and helped pump water for irrigation, and the story inspired millions around the world and demonstrated the power of African grassroots innovation. So that's Malawian innovator William Kamkwamba. Doing things with raw materials. Well done. And this is the kind of innovation that we want to celebrate more and more on this program.
The Morning Switch Weekend with the Shy Guy.
I Show Speed, often called Speed, who is a popular American YouTuber and live streamer known for his high-energy personality, loud reactions, and unpredictable humor. He visited Ethiopia, and he was shocked what he found out, actually, when he got to Ethiopia. He got to find out that, they don't use the Gregorian calendar. That is, we are in 2026 right now. And he got to find out they are in 2018.
2018. Nah, you trolling me. It's 2026. No. It ain't 2026. Wait, we in the past? Ronaldo is still in Real Madrid. Everything is in the past here.
Oh man, how shocked the Speed was. He went back in time.
Saturday and Sunday mornings belong to the Morning Switch. 3 to 6 a.m. Central African Time. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Malawi's President Peter Mutharika has directed that a fresh inquiry be conducted into the plane crash that claimed the life of former Vice President Saulos Klauser, political analyst Undule Mwakasangula. Undule, what are they politically and institutional factors that may have influenced President Peter Mutharika's decision to order a fresh inquiry into the crash?
Let me start by saying that the death of the former president and 8 others was a painful national tragedy. You know, public trust is very important. If people feel that the first report left gaps, the president may believe that a fresh inquiry could restore confidence and provide closure. So the decision by the president may be influenced by public pressure, but also the need to rebuild trust in the state institutions.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
South Africa's Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, says that the ongoing US-Israel war could push fuel prices higher, warning that motorists should prepare for increased costs at the pump. He made the remarks at the Southern Africa Oil and Gas Conference, which is currently underway in Cape Town, where industry leaders, policymakers and investors have gathered to discuss the region's energy future and explore opportunities in Southern Africa's oil and gas sector. Channel Africa's economics reporter Innocent Samosa is there, and he filed this report.
The gathering comes at a time of heightened geopolitical tensions and uncertainty in global oil markets, raising questions about energy security, investment, and the role Africa can play in stabilizing global supply. South Africa's Minister of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Gwede Mantashe, says while there is no immediate risk of fuel shortages, citizens should prepare to pay more at the pump.
Every discussion that we're having today, I'm sure you will all contribute in saying, how do we mitigate that reality? If Iran closes the strait and no oil goes through there, it means here we must gear ourselves for a higher price of oil. And the only thing that will save us in that is that conflict in the Middle East is impacting on the world, not on us. It impacts on the price of oil in the world.
The Director General of the Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources, Jacob Mbele, says the current global conflicts highlight the need for Africa to accelerate the development of its own energy resources and refinery capabilities.
I don't think we're far from achieving exploiting our regional resources. The point I raised about where we get our crude oil, where we get our gas currently, is from the region in Mozambique. And I also think it's not about the region being on our own, but it's about the region exploiting the resources that we have so that we create options for ourselves, but even for the rest of the globe, because there are others who are actually scrambling for supply as well. And the region could actually be, this for me is an opportunity if the region was ready, for the region to actually assist the rest of the world as well.
But how important is regional cooperation in building energy security across Africa in fighting energy poverty?
I think regional partnership is key. Maybe let me first start by saying that what we've been indicating during this period in terms of where our supplies come from. For example, when you look at crude oil, our crude comes from West Africa. Obviously, if there are developments elsewhere in the continent, even in areas like Namibia, as a country and as part of the region, we would want to obviously see how we can be part of benefiting from that. But the discoveries that you are seeing happening in Namibia, in the Orange Basin, are also an indication of what's available on the South African side. So regional cooperation becomes important for us to maximize and get critical mass or critical volumes that we need to get the projects off the ground.
As global energy markets remain uncertain, industry leaders say Africa must accelerate the development of its own energy resources to strengthen energy security and drive economic growth. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Samosa in Cape Town, South Africa.
Okay, so 7:58 Central African time, and African innovation is a focus for me, and I'm going to take you back in history, long time. Ancient Egyptians developed papyrus, which is one of the earliest forms of paper. Papyrus plants that grew along the Nile River. Sheets were made by pressing together strips of the plant and drying them Paris allowed written records, literature, and official documents to be preserved and shared across the ancient world. So ancient Egyptians developing the earliest forms of paper in our time. And then Africa's solar-powered internet schools. Right, so Kenya has pioneered the use of solar-powered digital classrooms in remote communities, and these systems use solar panels to power laptops, internet routers, educational software in schools that previously had no electricity. And this innovation is helping bridge that digital divide across rural Africa. So there you go, innovation abound across the continent and solving for a lot of the issues that we have that are unique. We don't have energy, we don't have power, and so finding ways to harness the resources that we have are plenty, as in terms of the sun. There you have solar-powered digital classrooms in remote communities in Kenya. Well done to you. And that brings us to 7:59. Yeah, we now start the third and final hour of Rise and Shine with me, Peter Ndoro, and thanks for joining us. We begin this hour with the news with Jwalene Tulo Ngwepe. It's 8 o'clock.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Several people are feared dead after multiple blasts have struck Maiduguri city, the capital of Nigeria's insurgency-hit northeastern state of Borno on Monday. Video circulating online showed emergency responders at a Maiduguri hospital attending to injured people, with some with torn and bloodied clothes. In a statement, Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum said the explosions had claimed victims and injured others without saying who was responsible. Bellarmine Mugabe, son of former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, and his co-accused Tobias Matonze are back in the Alexandra Regional Court in Johannesburg, South Africa this morning, where plea negotiations are expected to begin. They are accused of shooting a 23-year-old gardener at the Mugabe residence in Hyde Park in February. They face charges of attempted murder, defeating the ends of justice, unlawful possession of a firearm, and contravening the Immigration Act. The pair abandoned their bail application last week after the state argued they may be a flight risk due to their alleged illegal status. Luyanda Tanga reports.
The legal team representing Bellarmine Mugabe and Tobias Motonte has hinted the pair may plead guilty to some of the charges. The state has also accused them of being in the country illegally. The case has been transferred to the regional court for plea negotiations. The state is expected to outline the seriousness of the charges, while the court will determine the next step in the proceedings when this matter resumes today.
The Pan-South African Language Board, PANSALB, says it's taking steps to ensure the integration of African languages into South African society. The board was reacting to criticism from Sport, Recreation, Arts and Culture Minister Gayton McKenzie of the perceived slow integration of these languages. PANSALB has been hosting a two-day National Language Summit in Cape Town. PANSALB says while language integration efforts may seem slow, efforts are underway. PANSALB Board Chairperson Professor Lolui Makubu Badenost.
We are doing it, be it in business, be in academia. For instance, ABSA, if I'm withdrawing my money, I'm getting it in Gesizulu. If I'm going to the universities, the government has invested and they've put ring fence money for us because we complain. And then some universities have already started teaching in their mother tongue, not only in higher education, even in school, the mother tongue-based education. We are moving slowly but surely. And the South African Sign Language, who would have thought that it would be one of the 12 official languages? It is our force. We are moving.
The U.S. State Department is reportedly considering withholding life-saving assistance to people living with HIV in Zambia as a negotiating tactic to force the government there to sign a deal giving the United States more access to its critical minerals. The New York Times reported this development after obtaining a copy of a memo prepared for U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio by the department's Africa Bureau. Zimbabwe earlier rejected a health deal with the United States over demands for sensitive sensitive biological data. Sharon Bryce Pease reports that the Trump administration has signed bilateral health deals with almost $20 billion with at least 18 African countries, including Lesotho and Botswana.
The Times quotes from a draft memo that the United States would secure their priorities by demonstrating a willingness to publicly take support away from Zambia on a massive scale. The report suggests Washington is seeking to undercut Beijing's unfettered access to Zambia's mineral wealth. Lusaka in February pushed back on elements in the proposed MOU that included $1 billion in U.S. funding over 5 years to tackle HIV and malaria in the country, which would also require $340 million in co-financing from Zambia's government. That government insisted that the arrangement was focused on health, but that they remained open to engagements mutually agreed on and fully aligned with the country's national interests.
The European Union has announced it will deliver more than $500 million in humanitarian aid to Middle Eastern countries and regional states hosting refugees. This comes as Israel continues its bombardment of Gaza, with the latest attack claiming 12 lives, including 9 police officers. Israel is also advancing its attacks on Iran along with the United States. The largest share of aid, over $200 million, will go to Syria. Most of the remainder will be divided between Lebanon and Palestinians in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. For any news stories you would like to share with us, please do send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa News, I'm Cholani Tulo Mwepe.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
In a sports headline, Ethiopian athlete is the new Barcelona champion. Asian Football Confederation says Iran is still playing in the World Cup 2026 despite withdrawal rumors. I'll be back with these and other stories at the bottom of the hour.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
6 minutes past 8 Central African time. We begin the second hour of the third and final hour of the program in earnest now. Good morning to you. You're listening to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. I'm Peter Ndoro, and we invite you to stay connected to Africa and the world on Channel Africa, the international voice of the South African Broadcasting Corporation. You can watch or listen anytime, anywhere at channelafrica.co.za, and you can also catch us on your mobile apps. Just go to SABC Plus and you'll find us. Look for Channel Africa, and we are also available on the audio bouquets on DSTV and also on OpenView, as well as social media. If you are on Facebook, look for Channel Africa, and if you are on the other social media platforms, at Channel Africa 1 is our handle. So what's coming up in this hour? Let's give you a heads up. So we are going to be looking at, Africa's climate challenge, rather. The big question is, who pays for the continent's recovery? We speak to a climate advocate ahead of the Africa Matters Summit that's taking place on the 25th of this month, and we want you to be very much a part of finding solutions for the continent. And then in Mali, millions in mining revenues are being handed directly to communities, and the question is, will it translate into real development on the ground? And that's what we'll be looking at. But don't forget that Channel Africa is first with the African story globally.
O conflito militar envolvendo o Irão, os Estados Unidos e Israel provocou uma escalada acentuada nos preços do petróleo, especialmente devido à ameaça de interrupção do tráfego pelo Estreito de Hormuz, responsável por cerca de 20% do consumo mundial de crudo. Para países africanos dependentes de importações de energia, esta tensão não é apenas um problema econômico, mas também social, com impactos potenciais sobre inflação, custos de produção e acesso a combustíveis essenciais. Para perceber os riscos e possíveis respostas. Falamos com o Dr. Lutumba Simão, economista angolano.
Para os países exportadores, vão verificar uma receita mais alta do que previam. E do ponto de vista de custo para as populações, vamos identificar que também pode aumentar a inflação, principalmente naqueles países onde, de facto, importam o crude e os combustíveis derivados do petróleo bruto.
De segunda a sexta-feira, das 20 às 21 horas locais, este é o Caleidoscópio do Canal África.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Southern Africa is stepping up efforts to unlock its oil and gas potential at a time of global energy uncertainty and growing demand for a reliable supply. In Cape Town, policymakers and industry leaders are gathering for the Southern Africa Oil and Gas Conference, where investment, exploration and regional cooperation are high on the agenda. South Africa, through the Petroleum Agency South Africa, is positioning itself as a key player in the upstream sector. But questions do remain about investor appetite, regulatory uncertainty, and also how oil and gas fit into the continent's broader energy future. Well, to unpack some of these issues, we're now joined by Adrian Stradom, who's the CEO of the South African Oil and Gas Alliance. Adrian, thanks very much indeed for joining us and welcome to the program.
Good morning to your listeners. Thank you. It's good to be speaking to you.
All right. So South Africa is often described as underexplored when it comes to oil and gas. What are you currently seeing in terms of investor appetite for offshore and onshore exploration?
Yeah, there will always be investor appetite. The only issues would be if they find it, if investors find it.
Adrian, your line is struggling a little bit. I'm not sure if you can move a little bit and reposition yourself, and maybe that might help us. Can you hear me? All right, so Adrian, I'm going to put you back through to my producer, and then hopefully we'll be able to get you on a better line. Stay with us. Okay, so we're taking a look at the oil and gas sector in Southern Africa, but South Africa in particular, and I've got a feeling that Adrian is going to be telling us a little bit about, yes, it's one thing to have all this potential, and there's always investor interest, but there is a catch. Let's find out what that catch is. Adrian, you're there?
I'm here. I was saying, there will always be an appetite for investment. And one of the barriers would be the ease of doing business. If it's not easy, companies will move elsewhere, to where it is easier to do business. And we've seen that happen in South Africa. So, but on the positive side, I can see the South African government really committed to move ahead. There is such a huge potential for employment creation, fighting the war against poverty, and making sure that we take this country to the next level. Oil and gas, and particularly gas, is such a game changer in terms of economic development. We need that massive injection into our economy. Also from an energy security perspective, it is so important we've learned this, especially with the geopolitical issues that we're facing at the moment. We need to have energy security, over time. And gas is that key. And we have huge resources. And at the conference that we're having the second day of today, we will continue to discuss how we are better prepared, our readiness is improved to make sure that we optimize this opportunity, make use of it, and get all the resources that we've been blessed with in South Africa.
I'm guessing that these gas resources have been known about for quite a while now. What is it about the current scenario that's perhaps bringing a bit more urgency in terms of finding solutions to get this resource to board?
I think there is a fresh realization that we, as a country, have to be more energy secure. There's a fresh realization also, that Africa has 600 million people without electricity. And renewable energy is great, but it will definitely not respond to the need here. We need to develop our industries in Africa, Southern Africa, and we need heavy current supply. Gas is definitely a brilliant solution to some of the challenges that we are facing and will be facing into the future. So we cannot miss this crisis, the opportunity. Also, in addition to that, we have a gas cliff coming up 2028, 2029, potentially, where we certainly will, from an industry perspective, need more gas, fresh supplies of gas. So the demand for gas is definitely there. And we need to make sure that over time we, as a country, become, self-sufficient in terms of gas and oil as well, for that matter. Sorry, you with me?
I said all of this rests, I guess, on investors coming in. Is it too much for us to do it ourselves, or we have to just find ways to be more attractive to get these projects off the ground?
Yeah, these exploration projects come at huge cost. I don't think any country generally have the capital to do this kind of exploration that is needed. And excuse me, South Africa is no exception. So we definitely need that injection, and it is definitely about making South Africa more attractive for investors. There has to be simple, clear legislative frameworks. Investors want to know exactly what is allowed, what not, and what it is that they have to, pay to beyond the capital needed to explore. So they wouldn't invest billions into an insecure and unclear framework as such.
So I think one of the challenges is this question of fossil fuels and transition, and so we are blessed with these rich resources we've not yet even tapped into fully, and yet it looks as if these are energy sources that need to be starting to be phased out. How do we deal with that?
The energy transition is certainly a issue that one needs to take note of. But from an African perspective, I've just said that we've got 600 million people without electricity. We need to, restart and engage our manufacturing industries and grow our manufacturing industries going forward. Africa is one of the continents with the best prospect of population growth into the future. If you compare it to the other continents, it's only China and India possibly that will be growing in population. The others will more or less plateau. So if you look at the scenario going forward into the future, we will certainly be needing fossil fuels into the future for a long time. So investors will not invest if there was, a definite challenge in that respect. The great thing is that you use investors' money, and the government people benefits from the whole investment and infrastructure development as well. And then, of course, energy security. So it's a win-win for South Africa. I cannot see in the short term how we're going to be, at the moment, even driving an electric car, as nice as that may seem, we are not using renewables. Generally, we're using coal because we have to charge with electricity generated from coal. So in Africa, I don't foresee that we will, at a switch, be able to reach net zero. It's going to be a long process. The developed world has the opportunity of going back to their gas. We don't.
Right.
So we cannot afford to neglect, the benefit of energy security, going forward. We're importing most of our petroleum products from overseas, paying
it's time for a shift.
A premium as a result.
Adrian, we're going to have to leave it there. Unfortunately, time not on our side. But thanks very much indeed for giving us some insights on what could be the most beneficial future for us in terms of the resources before us. Thanks so much indeed for your time.
Thank you. Definitely in terms of economic development and employment creation in Africa. Thank you.
That was Adrian Stradom, who's the CEO at South African Oil.
Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters, a platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Okay, so one of the big things that are happening for us on March the 25th is the Channel Africa Africa Matters Summit with partners Wits Business School in Johannesburg, and it is a big deal for us because we are hoping that summits like this are going to be looking at the continent's issues, the continent's challenges, and finding solutions, and not just talking about them. And as journalists, we're very tempted to just report on them, but this is an opportunity to bring academics, stakeholders, thought leaders into a space, have a conversation, and come out with concrete solutions to the challenges that our continent is facing. And so the first one that's happening on March the 25th is going to be looking at this big issue of climate change, finance in particular, and how we find our feet in terms of recovery, given the fact that a lot of the funds that have been promised to help Africa are just not materializing. So what can be done? What can be done? What can we do? We'll be exploring that in this moment.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Wow, but first, South Africa's former president, Jacob Zuma and Thabo Mbeki, are adamant that Justice Sisi Kampepe must recuse herself as chairperson of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission cases inquiry. This on the grounds that the prior roles that she held may compromise her impartiality. Over the next 2 days, a full bench of the South Gauteng High Court in Johannesburg will hear the two former heads of states bid for the review of Kampepe's refusal to recuse herself. And they also charged that Justice Kampepe was not transparent about her former positions as TRC Commissioner and Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions. According to them, she also acted improperly with respect to the recusal application against Chief Evidence Leader Advocate Ismail Semenya. Musi has more.
Counsel for former President Thabo Mbeki, Advocate Ngwako Maineje, has argued that it is unsurprising that his client would have an apprehension of bias with regards to TRC cases chairperson, Justice Sisi Kampepe.
When you are now the chair sitting, there are victims before you, families of victims, that you, in respect of whom you said the perpetrators must be prosecuted, and you were in the NPA to prosecute them, and you are simultaneously, you refuse me amnesty and former President Zuma. We must somehow it is unreasonable, wholly unreasonable, that applying a normative value of an ordinary person in the streets looking up on this would find that this is, I have an apprehension.
My Nature accuses the retired Constitutional Court judge of failing to make a full disclosure on her prior roles.
The only thing she denies is she's not aware of any policy affecting TRC cases that she was involved in. She's not aware of it. She's not disclosing facts. Nothing. We don't know as we speak. We know she was second in command in the NPA. We know that Advocate Nuka from 1998 was preparing for the prosecution of TRC cases. The second in command is quiet about what role she was playing. Completely quiet, other than a denial. Now, what the case says, you disclose, because when you don't disclose, the question is there something to hide? What is it you're hiding if you don't make full disclosure?
Continuing on the same thread, counsel for former President Jacob Zuma, Advocate Dali Mpofu, has said that the court must accept, in the absence of evidence to the contrary, that President Cyril Ramaphosa did not know that Kampepe had served as a deputy NDPP and a TRC commissioner. Ramaphosa, as a respondent in the case, has said that he asked Kampepe through Minister of Justice Mamuluku Kubai to step down after he found out her history, but she refused.
The president of this country puts under oath, he says to this court, I was not aware of these things. I've now become aware of them, and I would not have appointed her. And the other side says, no, that's not true. On what basis can the court make that finding without cross-examining the president, that he has perjured himself before this court? He has not. That finding can never be made. The court has to accept that the president was not aware of these facts. The court, just as the court has to aware that former President Zuma and former President Mbeki were not aware.
Mpofu says they must be given access to emails and WhatsApps between Kampepe and Chief Evidence Leader Advocate Ismail Semenya. This is to prove the allegation that she improperly intervened in a failed attempt last year to have Semenya step down.
Sometime in November 2025, says President Zuma, it was reported to me by a whistleblower that the chairperson had committed actions which amount to bias, gross misconduct, and/or corruption, in that she had inter alia coached and colluded with one of the parties in the Semenya SC recusal application, namely Semenya SC himself, in that she advised him of weaknesses in his case and even went as far as sharing research in her possession regarding to the disputes and telling him to convey certain tips to Advocate Vas Soni SC, who was representing Advocate Semenya SC. So that's the allegation.
The two presidents further charge that Khampepe acted improperly in refusing to step down in her personal capacity. They say that the decision should have been taken collectively, including with Commissioners Diale Khomo and Advocate Andrea Gabriel. The review application continues on Tuesday, with the Commission expected to put forward its rebuttal.
Right, let's catch your headlines. And giving us those headlines is Jwalani Tulongwepe. Good morning.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. Making headlines. Several people are feared dead after multiple blasts have struck Maiduguri city, the capital of Nigeria's insurgency hit northeastern state of Borno. On Monday, Bellarmine Mugabe, son of former Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, and his co-accused Tobias Matonhodze are back in the Alexandra Regional Court in Johannesburg, South Africa this morning, where plea negotiations are expected to begin. And finally, scientists in Scotland say they've discovered a way to make a drug for treating Parkinson's disease from used plastics. I will have details on these and other stories at 9 o'clock.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Right, let's turn our attention to sport. Good morning to Figileli Ngwaje.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Peter. First up, it's athletics. Ethiopia's Fontaine Tesfaye produced a stunning debut to win the women's race at the Barcelona Marathon in 2 hours, 10.53 seconds, the second fastest time in history. Kenya's Jepscoit Kiplimo finished runner-up with Zeneiba Yemar third. In the men's race, Uganda's Abel Chelangat held off Patrick Mosin and Jonathan Korir to claim victory in 2 hours, 04.57 seconds. Both Mosin and Korir set personal bests as they chased Chelangat to the line, but the Ugandan held firm to secure the title. On to football news. The Asian Football Confederation, AFC, says it has not received any notification from Iran that it will withdraw its national football team from the FIFA World Cup 2026. Iran have qualified for the 48-team tournament in the United States, Canada and Mexico, starting on the 11th of June until the 19th of July, are scheduled to play 2 group matches in Los Angeles and 1 in Seattle. Iran's sports minister has said it was impossible for the players to participate in the tournament after the U.S. launched the airstrikes with Israel against Iran, killing its supreme leader. U.S. President Donald Trump said last week that Iran was welcome to participate in the World Cup, but he believed it was not appropriate that they may be there for their own life and safety. An official withdrawal by Iran from football global showpiece would be the first in the modern era and would leave FIFA with the urgent task of finding a replacement. Rugby news. The newly crowned World Rugby 7 Series champions, the Blitzboks, are now shifting their focus on the upcoming Hong Kong Sevens tournament from the 17th to the 19th of April. The Blitzboks withstood a furious onslaught from Fiji in the New York final to win 10-7 and take this season's overall title. Hong Kong Sevens hits 50, but fans more focused on ticket prices for just an ordinary week. The tournament in Hong Kong, HSBC Sevens World Championship, will be featuring 30 teams playing 72 matches. Blitzboks coach is Philip Sneeman.
The way we defended the whole tournament long, we weren't always as clinical as we would have liked to be, but the effort and heart was always there, so I knew the guys will fight for each other, and in that last minute they were all over the show, and I think they jumped out of places that nobody can imagine they can come from, so all credit must go to the players. They showed a lot of effort, a lot of heart, and I think a massive defensive effort from the players.
Sneeman says hard work lies ahead for the defending champions in the Hong Kong tournament.
Obviously you had a plan in mind, and but I do think it's a little bit sooner than expected. But yes, I think we're still building. We're not where we want to be. There's still the championship ahead of us. So we need to stay humble and we need to keep both feet on the ground. And I still believe this team can go even further and they can make another step up. But for the next week or so, we're going to celebrate the victory. We're going to be really proud, and then we get back to zero and make sure we kick into another gear.
Finally, tennis news. Australian former tennis player and coach Marinko Mantasevich has been handed a 4-year ban after breaching anti-doping rules. Mantasevich reached a career-high singles ranking of 39 in 2013. He retired from the sport in 2018 and has since become a coach, working with Australian players Chris O'Connell and Jordan Thompson. There is no suggestion O'Connell or Thompson have breached any rules. In a statement published by Australian tennis website, The First Serve in February, Mantasevich admitted he underwent a blood transfusion in Morelos, Mexico, towards the end of his playing career. In the same statement, Mantasevich slammed the ITIA's methods, calling them corrupt. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. This is Channel Africa Sport with me, Fikile Nwati.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
1957, I'm taking you back in history right now. The Arab Solidarity Accord, Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia and Jordan. So in the wake of the Suez crisis, and it sounds very familiar to the what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz, doesn't it? In the wake of the Suez crisis, the leaders of Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia and Jordan finalized something called the Arab Solidarity Accord. Now this pact aimed to coordinate military and economic policies to defend against foreign intervention in North Africa and the Middle East, solidifying Gamal Abdel Nasser's influence as a leader of the Pan-Arab movement.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African Perspective.
Time now for the final business news bulletin on Rise and Shine. And with us at the desk is Nosipo Zuma.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Peter. Good morning. In your business news this hour, South Africa's power utility Eskom will implement an average electricity tariff hike of 8.76% for the 2026-2027 financial year following approval by the National Energy Regulator, NERSA. Now, the adjustment will take effect from the 1st of next month for customers who purchase electricity directly from Eskom. The increase in tariffs are expected to place additional pressure on households and businesses who are already struggling with the rising cost of living. Eskom spokesperson Daphne Mokoena.
NERSA has approved an average electricity price of 8.76% for customers supplied directly by Eskom. The new tariffs will apply from 1st April 2026 for Eskom direct customers. Municipal bulk purchasers will implement their tariff increases averaging 9.01% from 1 July 2026, in line with the Municipal Finance Management Act, which requires municipalities to implement tariff changes at the start of their financial year.
The Communications Workers Union in South Africa is calling on the government to ensure the allocation of the budget it had promised for the implementation of the Business Rescue Plan at the South African Post Office. The call follows the announcement by the business rescue practitioners that they plan to seek the liquidation of the Post Office. Government had pledged to allocate just over $238 million to fully implement the business rescue plan at the post office. However, the funds have not yet been released. The union's Nathan Bowers says workers are prepared to protest if the liquidation action is effected.
The national leadership of the Communication Workers Union will meet to discuss our response. And already we are saying that we are going to go to the streets. Our workers are ready to take action. There is no way that the Communication Workers Union is going to allow that the People's Post Office goes down.
Nigeria's headline consumer inflation slowed slightly in February to 15.06% year-on-year, 15.10% in January. It was the 11th consecutive monthly slowdown, though the declines were marginal in January and February. The Abu Dhabi National Oil Company has suspended the loading of oil at the port of Fujairah after an Iranian drone attack sparked fires at the terminal. The port is located outside the Strait of Hormuz, which has been effectively blockaded by Iran. A drone targeting Dubai's international airport temporarily stopped air traffic. Qatar has also been intercepting Iranian missiles in Doha. The BBC's Brabba Peta Asha says people there are concerned about their future.
Privately, people have said to me that they are anxious about the future. They don't know what this means long-term for their jobs, for the economy, for all the international links that drive the business model here. But I think the fact that the Qataris have been successful in intercepting most, if almost all, of the missiles and drones has given people a sense of reassurance. And that is what they were telling me when I went to the market yesterday.
And finally, the body that advises the world's central banks, the Bank for International Settlements, has urged policymakers not to overreact to the Iran crisis-driven spike in global energy prices, calling it a textbook case of when to look through a shock, especially if it proves temporary, and not react with monetary policy. This month's 40% surge in oil prices and near a 60% leap in wholesale gas prices have evoked comparisons to 2022, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the post-COVID reopening of the global economy sent inflation rates soaring. Now, this time, financial markets have been quick to reprice expectations, betting central banks won't want to make the same mistake again. Your financial indicators: $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 Naira 384. In Botswana is 13 Pula 49. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 28. And in Zambia, it's 19 Kwacha 51. The BRICS countries: $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 Ru 32. Russia is 80 rubles 10. India is 92 rupees 31. China is 6 yuan 89. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 16 Rand 67. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 87 to the euro. Looking at commodities, gold is trading at $5,022 and platinum at $2,157 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $103.13 a barrel. Now, for any business news stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Nusi Posoma.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African Perspective. your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Mali's military-led government is taking a bold step to reshape how the country benefits from its vast natural resources. Authorities have begun distributing approximately $33 million US dollars in mining revenues directly to municipalities through a local mining development fund designed to ensure that communities living near mining operations see tangible benefits. The move follows recent changes to Mali's mining code, part of a wider push across Africa to secure greater value from extractive industries and drive local development. But questions do remain about whether these funds will translate into real change on the ground. Well, to unpack this for us, we're now joined from Bamako by Dr. Zumara Diarra, who's a political and economic analyst at the University of Bamako. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Always good to talk to you.
Welcome. Thank you for having me this morning.
Dr. Diarra, just how significant is this decision to channel mining revenues directly to municipalities? And what does it tell us about Mali's broader economic direction that it's taking now?
Firstly, I would like to note that on March 12, 2026, the Malian government redistributing the 18.5 billion CFA to local governments through the local mining development fund. This measure resulting the reforms of the new mining legislation on the 2023 marks a strategic turning point for the national economic. I would like, secondly, it would help correct disparities by offsetting the negative externalities experienced by productions area by directly reinvesting a portion of the value created back into them. Secondly, the resource from this fund could enable municipalities to reduce their dependence on transfers from the central government. Thirdly, this new measure could help strengthen local investment. In addition to all that, the economic significance of redistributing mining revenues to municipalities in Mali also lies in the shift from centralized management to a participatory local development model.
So across the continent, there is this big push to find ways for countries to benefit more from their natural resources. How does Mali's approach compare with what we're seeing in other mining countries and economies on the continent?
Mali approach, as far as I'm concerned, is a new approach based mainly on the local development. Because it's long time ago, most of the resources from mining sector were investing in the central for the central government. But with this new approach, we are prioritize the local.
All right, so I'm wondering about the local authorities and the municipalities in Mali, whether they have the capacity to manage funds of this scale, because there really is going to be quite a lot of money coming through the system. And also, once they've got the funds, to be able to translate them into meaningful development projects.
From my point of view, it's a big challenge for the local authorities to manage this kind of fund. But there are some mechanism. Firstly, there is a local content consultation framework attached to the Office of the President of the Transition, responsible for regulating and monitoring local content in projects developed in Mali. Secondly, there is a permanent secretary for local content, which serves as the executive body for local content. Finally, there are, of course, specialized public financial oversight bodies, especially the Office of Auditor General, that we call in French Vérificateur General, and the National Economic and Financial Unit, which is a judicial body responsible for prosecuting economic and financial offenses. So I think with all these those mechanisms, the local authorities must be able to manage effectively this kind of farm.
And that's where we're going to leave it for today. Dr. Diarra, thank you very much indeed for joining us, and your insights always appreciated.
You're welcome.
That was Dr. Zoumara Diarra, who's a political and economic analyst from the University of Bamako in Mali, talking to us about this move by Mali to make sure that resources in the country find a way to benefit local municipalities more directly.
Africa is changing, and the world is paying attention. This March, Channel Africa invites you to be part of a new conversation. Africa Matters, a platform where experts, policymakers, and thought leaders come together to unpack the big issues of our time: technology, politics, economics, climate change, and the future of our people. This is where ideas meet action, where change becomes opportunity, where Africa's voice takes its rightful place on the global stage. In March 2026, Channel Africa hosts Africa Climate Change Recovery Summit. Join the dialogue. Be part of the movement. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Coming up in about 10 minutes' time is On the Move with Benjamin and Palisa. To tell us what we can look forward to on the program today is Brother Benjamin. Top of the morning to you.
Hey, how are you doing, man?
Yes, always good, always good.
Good, man. Yeah, we've got so many interesting topics, but I want to get into this one. I love our In the Cubicle feature, so whenever we can speak about that one, it's interesting. Artificial intelligence and how it's changing the many ways that companies hire, but also in the way that we work as well, and how we also put together our CV.
So what are the hiring companies doing with the AI?
I hear just from people, generally, people saying that there are technologies that they use that pick up keywords. And if you don't have that keyword in your CV, probably your CV won't get picked up by the technology itself.
My goodness, I wonder if it's searching our Facebook and social media pages as well to check what we're up to. That's fascinating. That's On the Move, coming up in about 9 minutes' time with Benjamin and Palisa.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, so we were talking about March the 25th, the Africa Matters Summit that's going to be taking place. Well, this is all because Africa's lack of financial resources to eliminate the impact of climate change is seeing a ripple effect on the continent's population. Yeah, solutions to this challenge will be discussed at this Africa Matters Summit hosted by Channel Africa and Wits Business School, taking place next week, Wednesday, in Johannesburg, South Africa. And the theme for this year is Financing Africa's Recovery. And one of the guests at the summit is Selim Ayenan, who's a climate advocate, who's with us on the line from Benin in West Africa. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you so much, sir.
What's going to be your focus during this summit? What are you going to be trying to get across?
Thank you so much. I think during the summit, as youth climate advocates, we're going to talk much about the climate adaptation finance, because adaptation finance is the priority for our continent, for Africa.
So, what are the big issues that you think can be solved? We know that the international community generally has let us down when it comes to climate finance. Is there something that you think we can do about it?
Yes, of course. I think we need to go through some advocacy strategies with especially those working, the stakeholder of UNFCCC. And we need to rebalance the climate finance toward adaptation, because most of the finance is directed to mitigation. And I think there is time to make some lobbies, especially during the SBs, which will take place in Germany. So we still have some time to, have some discussions with the different stakeholders so that at COP 31 in Turkish, things can move on.
I guess there'll be big questions in terms of, as you're saying, we're finding solutions. When we talk about these solutions, money still realistically is something that we still need to find. Do we have resources? And I think possibly for me, the biggest thing is the political will and collaboration across the continent to tackle this problem together.
Yes, of course. The political will is the very first one. And I should say that the issue of lack of finance is not just an issue, but is where the money is going. Sometimes when we were at the period of COVID-19, you see how people react, how governments, everyone was just trying to solve the situation. That's the same thing. Climate change is an emergency also, and I think that we should now realize that it's time to start funding the solutions. And after the political will, we need also to empower those young people that are working in the field. Okay.
Is the African voice being heard on these global stages?
Yes, I can say it's being heard more than before, but it's still not enough, especially where decisions are made. And too often, you see African voice are present in discussions, but absent in decision-making spaces, and particularly when it comes to finance allocation, for example. That's why we should strengthen the local leadership and youth voices. And African communities should also understand that the realities, we already have most of the solutions. What we need is the direct access to funding and platforms. So we are seeing some progress, especially there are more youth-led movements emerging today. And the real change will happen when the African voice are not just consulted, but trusted and resources to lead. Yeah.
Many African countries are already quite heavily indebted. How do we ensure that climate financing doesn't deepen that debt burden, but instead supports sustainable growth?
Yes, of course. That's why when we are advocating, for example, for climate finance, we always ask that it should not come as loans. Never, never. Climate change finance should come as how do you call it? As subvention. It should not come as loans because we already have a lot of debt, and I think when we come to the climate change issues, we should not have loans. No.
What outcome would you like to happen the most at the summit? What are you hoping will be a key outcome?
Okay, one of my key outcomes is that most of the stakeholders that will join this summit should focus more on the climate adaptation issues because these have priority in Africa. Also, They need to find a way to negotiate, to come together as one voice to negotiate with the different stakeholders so that at the end of the summit, for the final declaration or any document, anything that's going out after the summit, we find that yes, adaptation is still the priority of Africa, and we need more funding for the projects. And we need also to take into account the gender equality. We need to take account the people with disabilities, the disaster risk, and many, many aspects that are dealing with climate change in Africa. And we need to have a common voice to go to COP 31st in Turkish.
Selim, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very, very much indeed for joining us, and we look forward to hearing your thoughts at the Africa Matters Summit next week.
Thank you so much.
That was Selim Ayanan, who's a climate advocate from Benin in West Africa, and he'll be one of the guests at the Africa Matters Summit taking place on the 25th of March, sharing his views on solutions for financing Africa's recovery from climate change. And that's how we come to the end of today's edition, the Tuesday edition of Rise and Shine. And thanks so much indeed for joining us. I'm Peter Ndoro, and we leave you in the capable hands of the On the Move team with Palesa and Benjamin. Have an awesome day, everybody. Bye-bye.
SABC News. The African Perspective.